Alright, bear with me here for a moment. But this might be a little crude, but I want to show you something. Back in 1999, I did a search for nerve signal interference on the internet. And I had to put it in quotes to find this. I found this page, and I'm going to read it to you. It says techniques. Here is our alphabetical list of chiropractic techniques so far. Now, I actually made contact with these people at some point in time once I got my website up and running, and they never did make the change. I had some correspondence with them, and when they realized that my grandfather's work, which is, let me see here, shown right here, nerve signal interference removal, right there. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Nerve signal interference is what it says, but it's actually nerve signal interference removal. They didn't even have it listed right. But if you scooch over, same line, Craton. So this column right here is the names of the developer. Those are the developers. And here's the techniques. And as a rule, they always have a name listed with the technique. So this is key actually. It says, could the doctors and students who may be familiar with any of these techniques listed below please address any of the following questions regarding the techniques and their innovators? Wanting to know, one, is the technique full spine, upper cervical, cranial, or soft tissue? The full name of the technique innovator, the tech innovator's whereabouts, whether living or deceased, email address, U.S. mail address, phone, fax numbers, chiropractic school attended, and you're graduated. It says, can you give us a name and other information on any other techniques not currently on this list? Now, I'll tell you that when I went up to Davenport, Iowa, I mentioned this page to them, and they said, this list I found on the wall in their historical museum. And I went up there, well, once I found it, I went up there a second time to actually get Grandpa's name on the wall, which I have that video. I'm going to have to pull that out. The audio wasn't really good, but I do have it. When I'm actually in the historical museum, in the hall, and his name is on the wall. And I told them, I said, actually, that's nerve signal interference removal, is what I told them. Now, whether or not they changed it to what it should be or not, I don't know. They told me that they would. And they wanted to know his full name, Earl Franklin Craton. But Craton, nerve signal interference, should be removal. And my point here is that there's always a name. Now, why they were asking for that information, I don't know. But my contention is regarding the seated occipital lift, which is not on this list, by the way. It's not on that list. And nobody seems to know anything about it. Well, here they're asking, hey, can you tell us anything about this? And I can show you. Let me see here. I'll show you something that is key. Hang on a second here. I'm going to find it. YouTube. Let me get my channel up and running. Let's see here. My channel. And I want to show you what the response is going to be. So let me move ahead. There's a particular picture you need to see here. Here is Grandpa in Houston, Texas. Patient is seated. And there you go. Right there. Let me get this larger. This is 1976, I believe. 1976. the original innovator of the seated occipital lift that perfected it. And I can tell you now, they were watching him and they were trying to steal from him. In fact, I kept telling Mom, I said, they're waiting on him to die. This is the Houston Regency. There he is demonstrating at their convention in Houston. Nobody seems to know anything about it. The list I just showed you, right here, the seated occipital lift is not on the list, but nerve signal interference should say nerve signal interference removal, Craton. There you go. Now, anytime you have a generic term, a seated occipital lift without any name attached, there is a plagiarism taking place. They are stealing it from somebody. They're making an effort to take it without paying for it. They haven't properly learned it. They haven't jumped through the hoops in order to know it. And that is what happens. And then you get stuff like this. Let me see if I can't get this off of here. Let's just shut this down completely. Okay. Can I get rid of that one? Okay, then you get stuff like this here. I'm going to show you this one. Bear with me. Hang on. Come on, go back. YouTube. Let's see if it pops right back up. Well, here we go. Then you get stuff like this here.
Universities for people who want to make a difference. People just like you. You're all
occipital left. So this would typically be.
So this is generic. They do not credit the innovator. Notice this.
This is going to be a demonstration of a seated occipital left. So this would typically be done for a COC1 restriction, lateral flexion, coupled lateral flexion, rotation, anterior sagittal glide. There's a variety of different ways to do this. I'm going to demonstrate the method where the patient is placed on the chest. All right. So just by way of review real quick, the assessment would be to retract the cervical spine.
Now I'm going to tell you, they do not know what they're doing, okay? This is not the way that Grandpa taught me. This is they're trying to pick his brain for free. This is them trying to run with something they were not authorized to use. And they were aware that he was the best. They were aware that he was the best. I've already showed that he won the Texas Chiropractic College's Centennial Award. But this is what they come up with in order to try to get in on what it was that he did, because it seems so simplistic. And it is simplistic, but they're not aware of the details that actually come with a responsible delivery of Craton's method, which is what it became known as. They knew it as Craton's method. They refused to credit him because they parted ways, essentially. And I ended up with the work. But this is what we get, just the same. This is what their seated occipital lift, generic. This is what they're doing. And it is wrong. And I'll explain to you here in a little bit why it is. But here you go.
Bend it, a little bit of rotation back to the midline, and then apply overpressure from the top and get a sense of what that feels like. And then do the same thing in the opposite direction. So lateral flexion isolated to the top, rotation just back to the midline, get that nose back to the midline, and then some overpressure. All right, you're a little bit stiff in both directions. This direction is a little stiffer, however, so this is how we're going to set it up in this manner. Left lateral flexion, right rotation. So I'm going to just swivel you on the chair a little bit. All right, keep your feet flat on the ground, right? So the contact is going to be the middle finger, right underneath the occiput, all right? And
it's not accurate. It is not the middle finger, and I'm not giving up the technique for people to do what they have no authority to do, nor do they actually intend to do it right, because if they do it right, they're going to fix the problem, and that is not what chiropractic is about. Chiropractic is about getting you coming back. So they have bastardized his work, and they are close, but they're not right. That's small, but it is part of it. So starting out, their contact is wrong.
That middle finger right underneath. But the ear, if you open your hand up, the ear will go in that thumb index web. So it almost always works out that way. And that puts your middle finger in the sweet spot for where this adjustment works best. And your thenar is resting on the mandible, but your fingers are on the occiput and the cervical spine. Everything's in contact, and that'll eliminate any pressure on the mandible when you set this up. So there's your contact. There's your initial preload, just that left lateral flexion right there, right? And then once you get that left lateral flexion in, you add the rotation in, right? And there's the rotation right there, all right? So there's your preload. At this point, you place your chest, the doctor's chest, parallel to where the head and neck are, and you bend your knees a little bit, and you just place your patient against your upper chest, all right? Is that position okay for you?
Yeah.
Is the mic hitting you on the side of the head at all?
No.
You're okay? And then you reinforce the entire contact, not the finger, but the entire contact. You reinforce, and you bring your elbows out, and you get nice and relaxed, all right? So you're loose, the preload's already there, your arms are relaxed, and the force generation for this really comes from your legs. You do connect the patient to you. You connect the patient to you with your hands, but you're not really thrusting into your chest. You're not like doing that. But you are, I'm going to go ahead and perform this, you are lifting with your legs like that. And that's how that adjustment is done best. All right? Force generation from the legs. Thanks very much.
Okay, so he gets a crack. He does not talk about what the goal is. What the goal is actually to set the head in relation to the atlas, to place it back to perfect center. He doesn't talk about right or left as far as the head slipping to the right or the left. He doesn't talk about the head being rotated clockwise or counterclockwise. That is not what he's talking about. And yet he's still going for a crack. Now, he doesn't bother to determine pre-adjustment, quote unquote, or post-adjustment, whether or not any objective was actually obtained. And for him to yank up on this young man's neck without actually making a correction is unconscionable. It's unconscionable. You do not do that. Now, give me a moment. I'm going to go grab the skull. Give me a second here. I'll show you right here. Okay. Here is the top of the atlas. We're going to use a little nail here. The top of the atlas. This is where the head sets on top. You can see it real clearly here. There's one surface right there. There's one surface right there. Now this one over here is damaged, but there's still a surface there, and there's still a surface there. It's actually a dividing line. In a living person, there's actually a divider, a capsular ligament around this surface right here, around this surface right here, and then another one around both of them. So it's kind of hard for me to do this. I'm looking in the camera so that you can see it. But there's a surface, there's a limiting membrane between this one, a limiting membrane between this one here, front and the back. There's another one around both of them. Grandpa did dissections in Fort Worth, Texas, that proved that out at the Osteopathic College in Fort Worth, Texas. On the skull, there is also, trying to get the focus, there is this surface here, this surface here. Same thing here. This one here is probably the one that's damaged, but again, it would be here and here. Now, what that means, and I'll show you with this one here. What that means is that where they think that the joint, because the head sits on top of the atlas, they think that it glides in there, that it glides, you know, actually moves back and forth versus that this here is actually gliding. And I'll pull out some video here in a little bit, and I'll show you, I think it's Jimenez in particular, they're talking about the glide, and I'll bring this out again to show you more. But this, with that limiting membrane in there, it does not glide, it rocks. And it goes back, front, back, front, back, front. There's 10 degrees of movement in there, and it's only, or predominantly, the yes movement, because there's ligaments and muscles that tie all this in here. So for it to go this way or that way, which we'll talk about that later, that is not the normal movement of the occipital condyles on the atlas. That is not the normal movement. We'll talk about that later. The normal movement is a rocking back and forth, forward facets, back facets, forward facets, back facets, and it stays based on the soft tissues with this right here, the center, as that's the base. Forward, it goes forward, back, That's how that goes. It does not glide. It does not glide. It just rocks forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. It doesn't glide. That's not what it does. They have a 2-facet design in their textbooks, and that is wrong. They have a 2-facet design in their textbooks, and that is just wrong. It's wrong. The 4-facet design is key in understanding how the joint works. If you don't understand how it's formed, you cannot understand how it works. You just can't. Let's see, there we go. I'm thinking you can see me. I apologize. But you cannot understand how the joint works if you don't understand how it's formed. And they've got their textbooks wrong. And they talk about this glide, and they make adjustments that go this way, and it's just all wrong. It's disturbing to me. And the reason why that has happened is because they refuse to take responsibility and pay homage where it is due, which is, of course, to the originator. And I will show you one more time. Hang on a second. They refuse to take responsibility and credit the originator. And the originator being Dr. Craton. There you go. Dr. Craton. Kind of similar to what he did. This is 1976. This is him setting it up in order to actually make the correction. At this point in time, he has already made an analysis as to where his head needs to go. He's aware that it's the head, not the atlas, that he's moving, and he is bringing it back to a perfect center based on it's not a thrust, it is a pull. You cannot, a thrust is a push. He's pulling it. It is a lift. So Grandpa's terminology and technology was accurate. He knew what he was doing. And not only that, it was scientific because he could repeat his success. And that's what Grandpa told me. He said the reason why there is such a controversy is because their success is hit or miss. They have an idea in mind. If they have any success at all, they attribute their so-called success, even if it is perfect, to their idea that they had in mind. They do not understand what it was that they accomplished, and they cannot repeat it. He said, I can repeat it. That means that I actually understand what it is that I'm doing. I know what the problem is, and I know how to address it correctly, and I am statistically successful to a measure that they will never, ever, ever duplicate until they're willing to finally credit him. They cannot be successful because they don't know what they're doing. And it angers me. I'll come back to that crazy lateral movement. I've already mentioned it, but I'll show you again why it's wrong.